Okay, the market's just opened today, so we're going to be looking at the S&P E-mini, primarily using the 1500 tick bar chart. And in this video, we're going to talk about reading the markets as the price action moves along, primarily. Then we'll also be talking about some trade setups if we see them and we get them. And since we're going to be just talking about reading the markets using the oscillators, the indicators down here, we may or may not take trades. We potentially can force a couple trades just to see how it goes. But the primary thing that we're going to do is we're going to be talking about reading the markets. Now, as I said, the market just opened, and the first thing that I do is I look at the effort oscillator to see what it is potentially like. We see the overnight here where the effort was to move the price down a little bit, and then around the 7 o'clock time frame, buyers or demand start coming in to the market, and we see that with the effort bars here. And we're going to watch to see what it turns out to be like. After looking at the effort bars, the next thing I look at is the momentum oscillator down here, which has price momentum, and that's this thin tricolored line right here. Then it has time momentum, which is the dashed or dotted line right here. And then finally, it has trade momentum right here that is just bicolored. It's either green or red. So we look at that. And then, of course, we have the short-term trend oscillator, and we have the price bars with the different colors. So these are price cycle bars. And the blue bars are simply volume bars that are at least twice or more of the average. So we'll be looking at all of them. Now I see prices moving up here. It's crossed the VWAP, and we see that the effort bars came to a high point right here. Now they're starting to decline a little bit, and there's weakness coming in because of the gray bars here. They turn back green. Now this one bar here is a little bit longer. We see the trade momentum is strongly to the upside. So between these two, if you were going to take a trade right now, you would think the probability is that the price is going to move to the upside. You also have the price movement right here, which is above the upper bound. It's starting to cross down through the time momentum and the trade momentum line. So that's a little bit of sign of weakness. Up here, we look at the price bars. We now have two white bars up here. Although the effort bars aren't anywhere near as high as the upper bound of the oscillator, they are relatively strong. So the demand is relatively consistent here. Now it's starting to become a little bit weak, and we see that the price momentum is starting to come down and cross down through the upper bound of the oscillator. However, we see that the trade momentum is strong, and the short-term trend is strong as well. When we look at our 30-minute chart over here, we see that this line, and let's go ahead and put a horizontal line right here. This line right here would then be a potential support and resistance area. So you can see that is an area of demarcation. That's where there'll be some testing going on between the buyers and the sellers, or demand and supply. We'll see which one is going to have the greatest effect in that area. Again, we see weakness over here in the effort bars, because that's the main thing that we're watching right here, as well as the price momentum and the time in the trade momentum. The trade momentum, again, still strong above the upper bound. Over here on the 45-minute or 4500 tick bar chart, we see magenta bars on the effort oscillator. Now, if we were looking for a trade, we wanted to bear in mind the type of trades that we have. So we have a VWAP trade where the VWAP, when it changes color, we look to see, like right here, it went from red to gray, and that means the VWAP was in the 2 ATR area, and now it's back down to normal. Then we would look down here and we'd see where is the price momentum and the other momentums. And at this point right here, if we were going to take a trade off of this, this would be the point that we were going to take it. Here we see that the VWAP turned to an uptrend, which is a yellow color, and now it went to 2 ATR, and in certain spots, like right now, it's above 3 ATR. The green is above 2 ATR. Well, we know it's not going to last there, but it's still showing strong because the trade momentum is up above the upper bound, and we're keeping our eye on the effort. There nowhere since around the 7 o'clock, 7:30 time frame, nowhere has there been any weakness or has there been any serious effort to take price lower. It's all been to the positive side. Now we see price coming back down into the 2 ATR range, and we wouldn't even be checking for a trade until it went back down to yellow, to the normal trading range. Here we see some underscores. The red is showing some weakness and the yellow is showing some strength. But we do see that the price bars or the effort bars are getting a bit smaller, and here's weakness coming in again. However, these are on the momentum oscillator. The momentum is clearly to the upside with all of the different momentum lines. Now here we had a bar with volume that was twice the average volume, not a high volume. So I wouldn't be surprised that somewhere over in here that price started to come down a little bit. But we'll see that in the effort. We can forecast it here and be on the alert for it. But if that's true, of course, the VWAP is going to turn yellow and the price momentum is going to dive down above the upper bound of the oscillator and cut through both the trade and the time momentum. So we're looking for that. Otherwise, everything is still strong to the upside. Okay, so additionally, when we look at this twice the volume, we want to think, is this exhaustion volume? Is this stopping volume? Or is this a trend type of volume? Is it going to take it higher? Now here we're starting to see some white price cycle bars, and this is going to represent a lot of times either selling at the top or buying at the bottom. Well, right now we're at the top. These aren't particularly strong bars, but along with the bar here, they gave us twice the volume, and now we're getting white price cycle bars over here at the top. We're going to keep our eye on the effort oscillator and see if it goes down to the zero line. And actually, we're going to watch now to see if it'll go below the zero line, because it can go down to the zero line or it can come back to the VWAP here, and that would just represent a pullback in price. And if there is a pullback, what we'll see on the trade momentum line, we'll see it turn red and then green again, and we'll know that that red just represented a pullback. And even though the price is in an uptrend and the effort is all to the positive side, it's not exceptionally strong at any point. Here we see some effort bars. Well, here's one that's white, and now we see another white one going along with that. So again, we're looking over here at the 30-minute. We see that this was another support and resistance area. Here, let me expand that a little bit. Look, these are support and resistance areas we see on the previous time frame for the 30-minute. This is the 30-minute time frame. We see a lot of volume came in here to take it to the downside, and then it did move down, and from that point, it's moving back up. And these are support and resistance lines at that area. So where that heavy volume came in, right there is a support line, and we're seeing that being taken out. So this is today, this was yesterday, this was the prior trading day. So now we're looking to see what can happen here. Now, and we also see that here's a type of a top, here's a type of a top, so right in this area, right where this line is, there was a support and resistance area, and it did penetrate that. Now we'll see if it's going to penetrate this one. And when we look at this, we do see a magenta bar that's associated with this. I missed that earlier. I should have seen that earlier. Let's see when that came in. That was right at the 9:30 time frame. I should have seen that, and then we would have known right at this point that things were potentially going to go up. We would have been able to read this and trade off of it. But now, since that has reached this support and resistance area, we're going to have to see how it plays out. We can see that the demand is still coming in, but there's weakness within the demand, and that the price volume is still above the upper bound, as well as the trade momentum. That's significant that the trade momentum is still solidly green and above the upper bound. Here we get some timing alert dots to the downside. They're far from the contrarian bands, though. These are where you could take contrarian or counter trend trades. So they're far above that. This is kind of like in that middle ground, halfway between the contrarian bands and the VWAP line. Here we had the VWAP turn yellow for a second. So what we would have done is we would have looked to see, is this at the bottom, is the momentum at the bottom and going to go up? But as we see, it's still strong. So this wouldn't represent a trade in any degree. You also notice the short-term trend oscillator, it in itself is above the upper bound. So now what we'll start doing is it's 10 to 10, but we're going to keep our eyes on the 10 o'clock, the 10:30, the 11 o'clock, and maybe the 11:30 time frame to see if this strong short-term trend holds and what the momentum is playing out like. Here's the momentum. I'm sorry, what the effort and the momentum are playing out like. So again, we see just consistent demand. We don't see anything extraordinary. We don't see any classic signs of buyers coming in and then taking a pause. It's just that steady chugging along to the upside as all the demand orders are filled. Again, here we have another bar that's twice the average because it's blue. And with that twice the average, on this one, we saw that that had to then represent some type of demand because the price went higher. Now over here, we don't know. This could be, again, stopping volume, or it could be a trend type of volume to take it higher. We won't know that until we see what plays out over here with price, and we won't know what's going on with price until we see it appear in the effort line, and then the effort line will reflect itself in the momentum line. Now the price momentum is just starting to slope down, coming through the trade momentum, still above the upper bound though. So we're looking to see now it's penetrated on the 30-minute. It's penetrated that particular support area again, and now we look to the left over here. If it maintains this penetration of that resistance area, that's what I should have said. Then we look to the left, and we see that there's nothing really to stop it as far as resistance goes. At least until, in here we can put that line on now, until we get up to like this area, you know. So now when we collapse the screen, this won't show, but that's the next area. Here we see it dropping back down to this support and resistance area. So maybe it's not, that penetration is not going to hold. And that was an attempt to take it higher, but we'll have to see whether it's successful or not. We see that that went up, but all in all, on the effort bars, we see the effort bars coming down, and now they're getting even shorter. So I wouldn't be surprised that this is some type of stopping volume. Here, the price is coming down. Now, you may be tempted to take a short trade here because of this potentially being stopping volume, and you have white bars over here, but the white bars aren't strong, and also the trade momentum is so solidly green and above the upper bound that this is not a trade that we would want to get involved in. We do see the short-term trend starting to come down through the upper bound a little bit. So here's the 45. We see that it crossed the VWAP and went to the upper trend, and now it's still in the 2 ATR area. Now these are the indicators down here. These three oscillators are the indicators that are basically telling us about the movement of price and what's happening within the construction of the price bars. The real difficulty here is a psychological difficulty. You know, are you going to believe them, and what degree of emphasis are you going to place on each oscillator? So you always want to start with the effort oscillator and see what it's doing. And you can see that it's decreasing in size here. Price is coming back down a little bit, but remember the VWAP line would just be a support and resistance area. We want to get involved in high probability trades, and we don't have that yet. But again, the idea is you want to keep reading these different components of the trading system and see if your reading them is consistent with the price action, so that you are able to, in a high degree, be fairly predictive of what's going to happen to price. Such as right now, with the effort showing weakness, you know, it's just sporadic. The green is demand. It's just sporadic demand. Even though price is going higher, now it's coming down and the bars are getting shorter. So really, if this is a pullback area, there shouldn't be an extended supply side part of the histogram like this showing up over here. You know, if this replicates itself over here, then we have a more of a tug of war between supply and demand. And we see that here is the trade momentum still well above the upper bound, even though price momentum has come down, as it will. You're not going to keep going, you know, straight up or at a 45-degree angle. So now we're going to see the price momentum is going to go back up, and is the trade momentum going to hold? You're not going to go against the trade momentum generally. Now, again, this could come down, and it could even go below the zero line, but the VWAP is a support and resistance line, and the trade momentum line would have to go a little bit red, and then that would potentially indicate a pullback. So if it goes a little bit red and then green again, then we recognize that this is more like in a pullback situation than it is in a change of direction situation. And that's when we be looking for our opportunities, because we know that what other type of trades do we have? Well, here's the timing alert dots. These are trend trades. We could have taken these trades. Here's a trend trade. Here's a trend trade to the upside. Here's a trend trade to the upside. So with the configuration of the momentum lines and the effort lines, and again, the effort shows no strong demand or supply coming in, we could have taken these trades as well. And of course, the extended price areas where it's above 3 ATR, it tells you that that demand is going up. We know that price is not going to live above 3 ATR, but it goes up there, comes down, goes up there, comes down, goes up there. So that configuration by itself is showing that there's demand if you were just reading the VWAP line by itself. Now here's a situation where the price momentum line is going towards the lower bound, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it go below the lower bound as it is over here, goes to the lower bound or below the lower bound. But since the trade momentum is so high, we're looking at this as a pullback. And one of the configurations you'll get is like when price momentum goes below the lower bound, as it does over here, and that's associated with a timing alert dot. Just those two things in that configuration by itself is indicative of a potentially some type of demand coming in and price moving to the upside a bit. Then after that, you look for selling at the bottom. That's what these price cycle bars here would be. They would represent selling at the bottom. Once we know that that's taking place, when we saw this blue bar here twice the average demand, we can speculate that that is demand to the upside because of this history over here. Here we see the price momentum coming back, cutting back up through the time momentum and going back up. Let's see where our 30-minute is. Okay, so again, we've penetrated that. We haven't broken through that high yet. But remember, we're just looking to get 2 or 3 or 4 high probability good trades in the day, and we'll clearly be able to satisfactorily meet our trade objective for the day. Here's the 500 tick bar chart, and we see that shows a little bit of weakness coming down. on the 45-minute chart is more classical, not entirely, because this would form more of a V. It would go up to an apex and then come down, and we're seeing it did come reach a plateau here, and then it started coming down. So, and now we see the trade momentum starting to cross through the upper bound. So, and we see this. So go ahead, let's go ahead and put on a
order filled
short trade here. Take this off. We see some supply coming in this area. But remember, this is, we got to keep our eye on this, because this price momentum is already at the lower bound. So once it reaches the lower bound or goes below the lower bound, its tendency is to move back up. So we're trying to see here, is this twice the average bar here, is that going to take a price down, or is it going to be trend volume that's going to take it back up? So that's what we have our eye on. And there, if it does take it down, clearly there's going to be a struggle here, because they're not going to give up this type of momentum just at a sharp turn. So that's why, well, this is more favorable to a short trade. Well, we want to see that turn red. Now the entire question is this going to represent a pullback, or is it going to represent a change of direction? If it's a pullback, this momentum line will go back green. Well, for this momentum line to go back green, this price momentum, or this trade momentum line here, to go back green, this price momentum here, of course, it's at the lower bound, and it will have to continue back on up. We do see some timing alert dots to the upside here. That doesn't influence us much one way or another. It's mostly these effort bars here. We see it coming down. We actually would have, once we saw this, we would have liked to have seen a larger red bar. So depending on what your situation is, you might want to put a stop in somewhere with a stop loss, that's minor, because the the supply isn't very strong yet. But the indication here is you have the trade momentum that did change in coloration to the red side. Again, that may just represent a pullback, and with price momentum going down below the upper bound, below the lower bound, its tendency is to come back up. And of course that'll pull price back up with it. However, when price comes back up to the trade momentum line, that can also represent that can also represent a support and resistance area. So we're just seeing how it goes. See, we have another bar here that is twice the average size. Now it's not associated with the red bar. Again, for this to be a high probability trade, we would have liked to have seen another red bar down here. This bar is white, and these bars are very small in effort. So nobody is clearly establishing themselves on the supply side or the demand side. So when you get into a trade, you'd like to see it go with you. This may turn out to be an effective trade, but still, we would have liked to seen the supply side come in much stronger over here.
Order filled.
Okay, so that was a successful trade. We got into that trade simply because the trade momentum was coming back, coming down through. Now, we might have wanted to waited even for a more high probability trade, but we got into that because of the white bar here, price cycle bar here. This would be selling at the top, and that would be this top right here. And we had then trade momentum coming down, and then we had a twice an average size volume bar, and we determined because of this white bar that that was probably selling supply coming in. And then in fact we did have that come in over here. Now price is getting back down towards the VWAP, which we know is also a support and resistance area. So this proved right here not to be a pullback, at least not yet. But now we have another, it went green, and now we have another red indication here. So this might be a pullback. So now we have our eye on this. We're not going to trade this to the upside as a pullback yet. It would have to go green again, and we'd have to see what's happened with the effort bar. Clearly, there's a little bit of supply coming in here. So, all right, I'm going to cut the video off here because, and we see that here is the 30-minute support and resistance area. I'm going to cut the video off here because I don't want to make it too long, but that is reading the momentum line. Primarily, you start with the effort oscillator here. You start with that. You're reading that. Then you're watching what the momentum is doing, primarily between using price momentum as the guide and seeing where it is relative to the time momentum and the trade momentum. Clearly, if the price momentum cuts up or cuts through those areas, then that's a strong indication as well. And we actually can see that right over here. Here's price momentum cutting down through the trade momentum and cutting through the time momentum. So that was right here, and it's right here was your high point in trading, and then it came down from there. But you can see that it wasn't strong in demand actually, and it's not really strong in supply right here. But if you keep looking at the it's around the 10 o'clock time frame now. If you keep looking from 10:30 to 11 o'clock, they'll probably establish the direction of the day. Right here we see trade momentum going red, and now we're going to have to see if it turns back up or if it turns green, or what's going to happen. We see short-term trend line here is coming right towards the pullback line in the short-term trend oscillator. This is the pullback line, and of course it shows us a volatility too. Let me see if I can find that. There was an interesting one, let me see if I can, right in this area. You can see how that oscillator changes, and there was low volatility here. Now, this was during the overnight session, but there was just very low volatility in that area, or interest, really. That's what it's signifying. Really, there was no trading interest in that area. And then at this point, it picked up again, and we see the oscillator bands widening. That's not normally how an oscillator works, but that's just another aspect of the short-term trend oscillator, as is this pullback line, where we see that the current value of the short-term trend is down towards the pullback line. So it's not unusual that it'll come to this line and head back up. And we see that obviously could potentially be the case because we have the price momentum line here all the way at the bottom. It's at the bottom, we have a trend alert dot here to the upside. We have a short-term trend right towards the pullback line. So now we're just going to keep our eye on the effort line to see what the continuation of this is going to be. This seems to be the struggle area right here, because it went up to this high, and now it did not decline back down through this support area held right here, and so this seems to be like the area right here that demand and supply, or buyers and sellers, want to figure out who has the strength in that area. So again, that's a little bit about reading the market using this system and how to identify good trades and how to stay out of bad trades. So I'm going to close the video off now, and I hope that helped. This is using processtrading.com area. So if you like the video, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have any questions, go over to processtrading.com and leave questions or comments over on processtrading.com. At the bottom, there's the contact form at the bottom of the page, or you can leave a comment here. So hope all your trading goes well, and